RotoGrinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka BlenderEd, Blender HD if you want to follow me there on Twitter. And it's Tuesday, February 1st. It's a new month. It's a new day. That's what we're doing here. Daily fantasy, NBA. We're doing NBA, right? If you didn't do well on last night's slate, well, you got another slate. You got another slate coming up, and we'll be going over yesterday's slate a little bit. They take a first look-see at today. I mean, does it matter at 11 o'clock in the morning? I say that every day. I said that yesterday, right? And tons of stuff happened, right? So if you're the first thing in the door, give me those thumbs ups. Give me the thumb in the window right there. Click on stuff, whatever. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Feel free to chime in the chat. With NBA, it's hard to go over like today's slate 8 hours in advance when a million things could happen. So the more that you participate, the better the show could be. See you guys in the YouTube chat. Suki Singh, normally here early. Infamous Tuck, Doug Montgomery, morning. Good to be back. Been away on sabbatical. He's been away. I don't know what he's been doing. I don't know. Click Trolls, Matt Mears, Mari Donyeezy. B-shot faded Drummond. Was that bad? Yes. Yes, if you faded Drummond yesterday, I don't know what you were doing. We'll go over that in a second. There was a lot of news yesterday, right? We started the show yesterday. It's like, oh, we got the news. Embiid was be out. Okay, that was the news, right? It's like, okay, so Drummond at 3,700 on DraftKings. Then he had Tobias Harris, Tyrese Maxey, Seth Curry. I mean, Embiid's usage is ridiculous. So once you take him out, like everyone's underpriced. And then we started getting news. Then Sabonis was out, but then like Goga's out and Brissett is out. So they have like one center, Isaiah Jackson. That's about it. He's going to have to play. I don't know. See how he doesn't play 35 minutes, right? And he's 4,100. Then obviously SGA is out, right? We got that before, the day before, whatever. So some of these OKC guys were a little bit decent, right? Giddey, Dort, those types of guys. Then we got Butler. Butler's out and Tucker's out. Okay, so that upgraded like Bam, Tyler Hero. Right, even though he was coming off the bench. What else? I mean, what else did we get yesterday? Well, we got the Darius Garland was out. Okay, so that kind of little upgraded maybe Osman a little bit. And then we got Trae Young, right before lock. Maybe a half an hour before lock, 20 minutes before lock. Trae Young, he's out. But they have a lot of guards in the back. So like you could have played like DeLon Wright. You could have played Kevin Huerter. You could have played Bogdanovic, even though he was coming off the bench. You would still have to play, 30 minutes anyway. But you take away Trae's usage, and obviously everyone else gets upgraded. Now, these types of things, you don't have to necessarily even do in your head. That's why you subscribe to RotoGrinders, right? You subscribe to RotoGrinders, you get the NBA-only subscription. That's the only thing kind of going on now. But, I mean, we still have the NFL. We'll have showdown stuff for the Super Bowl. We got hockey, right? We got NHL stuff. We got soccer stuff. We got golf stuff. MMA coming up this Saturday, another card. So if you want the combo premium, feel free to go for the whole shebang. But if you sign up for RotoGrinders, you get our projections, right? We have a projections team that updates that, and Trae Young's out. Okay, what does that mean, right? So they go through, they do all the spreadsheet magic. They assign stuff. They know basketball more than I do. What the rotations are going to be, what the usage is going to be, what the assist rates, rebound rates, all that type of stuff. They put it through the ringer. Then typically about 5 minutes later, after the news, we get a projection update, and it's like all the work's done for you. So you get to see who gets bumped up, what happens. All right, we saw yesterday, obviously Embiid's out. Drummond's going to play God knows how much. He's 3,700. Okay. Yesterday, Drummond had a salary adjusted plus minus of 14.43 in our projections. Okay, with a smash rate, which means smash is like a GPP ceiling rate of 83%. Okay, 83%. Isaiah Jackson had a plus 8.47 salary adjusted, meaning that his median expectation is 8.5 points higher than what should be expected at that salary, which is a lot. Okay, 8 is a lot. 14 is ginormous. Okay. And we projected him to be 60% owned. I knew he would be higher. He came in at 79% ownership. Okay. 3,700. This is the main thing, especially in NBA, where it's not event-based sport. The distributions are much more normal in NBA than it is in any other sport. Don't think in terms of chalk and not chalk. That's black and white thinking. This is in all of DFS. This is not just NBA. You can think of MLB, NFL, anything. It's not about, we have a receiver that's going to be 32% owned in football. Oh, we're going to have a pitcher in MLB who's going to be 47% owned. Oh, that's very high. Oh, I'm going to fade that because I need to fade the chalk to win GPPs. Right? I got to fade it. Got to gain relative value. If you've taken my course, that's the term of, you want points that other people do not have, and you want people to have less points that a lot of the field has. Right? A 70% owned player that gets 0 helps you a lot when you don't have it. Right? And the same thing with a guy that's 1% owned gets 70 points because 99% of the field doesn't have that. That's relative value. If you go to theoryofdfs.com, I teach that in my course, those types of concepts. But I also teach the concept of nothing's black and white. It's not a matter of chalk and not chalk. There's no such thing as good chalk. Okay? Good chalk. That's very black and white terminology. Think more in terms of under-owned and over-owned. Okay? So a player could be chalky, could be 50% owned. Is that under-owned or over-owned? Depending on their price and projection, their position, the context of a slate, the chalkiest player on the slate could still be under-owned. We could also have a contrarian. You could have an under-owned, a guy that's only 4% owned. You go, contrarian play. He could be over-owned. Maybe based on the projections, that 4% owned player really should only be 2.5% owned. So in a vacuum for that just player, that's player's distribution in and of itself, you're getting negative leverage. You're getting less relative value from them. From playing a 4% owned player, that's going to be only 2.5. That should be 2.5% owned. So with Drummond yesterday, he was 79% owned in the large field DraftKings GPP. He was under-owned. If you told me he was 79% owned, I had him in. I played 50 lineups. I think I had him in 47 out of 50. That's what he ended up in. Right? If I go to my lineup set, yes, out of 50 lineups, 92% Drummond, 70% Jackson, 50% Harris. Right? I played a lot of chalk. They may not all be in the same lineup, but like Jackson and Drummond, it was almost hard to build lineups that projected well enough. You could limit your ownership in other ways. Jackson was under-owned also. Jackson came in at 44% owned. He was under-owned. Jackson probably should have been around maybe 50 to 55% owned. Something around there. If you would have told me 55, I would say that's about efficient. Drummond should have been 95% owned at 3,700, playing 30 plus minutes at 1.5 fantasy points per minute. He's under-owned. I'm going to fade him because everyone's playing. Well, look at this. I mean, all you have to do is think this way. Okay, you have Drummond here, right? So run just the optimal lineup. Okay, 308.7 with Drummond's 10x in there. Like 10x, right? 9.93 point per dollar, which is absurd in basketball. Now take him out. Now I'm going to X him out. 308.7 without Drummond, 297.93. You're giving up. You're giving up about 10 points in median projection by not playing it. You'd still have to play like a lot of the chalk also. You'd have to play Giddey and Harris and Bam and Jackson. Some Delon Wright, some Steph Curry. Your total lineup ownership is still going to be fairly high. Not as high as with Drummond, but still fairly high. So you take out Drummond, you're giving up 10 points in projection. Okay, so here's Well, let's do a thought experiment. Okay, these numbers are not based on my ownership here, so let's put this down to 1. Okay, so let's run the 1 lineup. Okay, let's do unique players 1. Let's take away this cap. Okay. So here's the lineup without. Let's put Drummond in and run it once. Okay, so to get with the actual ownerships in there, because I did it before the show. Okay, so same projection. Obviously, we're still using the player projections. Total lineup ownership is 269. If we take out Drummond, total lineup ownership is 211. Okay, but you're sacrificing 11 points by not playing Drummond. Now, can we make a lineup with 211 that has Drummond in it that gets higher than 297? So let's see if we can. 211, that's what we're looking for. So I'm going to put Drummond in. I'm going to go to build rules. I'm going to put 211 right here. That's the max we want. Just build 1 lineup. We may have to build a couple. Okay? Here, 197. Here, not even 211. Okay, so let's compare these lineups. Let's save these lineups. Save this and all lineups below. Let's save this lineup. And let's save this lineup. Okay? So here's our 3 lineups. Here's the lineup with everyone. This is essentially the cash lineup, right? The highest median projected lineup based on our projections as of 6:36 last night. 308.7 at 269. The best lineup without Drummond has a total lineup ownership of 211 and projects for 297. So it's like, if you were to fade Drummond, this was the best possible lineup. Best, based on our projections that you could have got. 297.35. Well, here's a lineup that has Drummond. We say we don't want higher than 211. So here's a lineup that is owned less. It's at 197. This is 211, remember. The one without Drummond is 211. The one without Drummond is 297.35. The one with Drummond is 300.75. So to drop down from this optimal, it's about 8 points. And you're dropping even more ownership than you did before, but you're gaining 3.5 more points over the other lineup that doesn't have Drummond in it. So this lineup has Drummond. Drummond, Harris, Curry, Bogdan, Powell, Halliburton, Dort, Adebayo. It has less ownership, and it still has Drummond in it. Right? This one doesn't have Jackson in it. Right? You can see here, there's no Isaiah Jackson. But I bet you we could find lineups that have both Drummond and Jackson. So we're trying to beat this 297 at 211. So let's try to do that. 297 at 211. Let's build more lineups. Okay? Let's build 100 lineups. Let's see. Max line ownership is 211 because we have to have a lineup that's lower owned than that, but projects better than 297. So let's see how many lineups that is. So I'm gonna put in, and we're only doing one unique, whatever. We're just seeing how many lineups could there be. 100. Let's see if we could even have. Maybe there are 100 lineups in between that. Maybe there's not. I don't know. That's what we're seeing. Okay. So 297 is the lowest. So we want to eliminate anything that's under 297. Okay, so let's go all the way down. Okay, here's 296s. Okay. Even though you could play those. Here's some 296s, 297. What's the exact number? Let's go with the exact number. What's the exact number on that non-Drummond lineup? 297.35. Okay, so anything under 297.35. 297.35. Let's see. Here is a 297.35. Here's a 297.35. Here's the one that doesn't have Drummond in it. So yeah, so anything below here. Delete all lineups below. Here. Okay. So that lineup that had no Drummond, you're like, I'm fading Drummond. The best lineup you can make. without Drummond was that 297 line. There are 26 other lineups that are that ownership and that projection or better. And out of those lineups, out of those 27 lineups, 26 of them have Drummond. Right? 3 have Jackson in it. So let's take a look at these lineups that have Jackson and Drummond. You're like, oh, the 2 chalkiest guys. How do you do that? Well, look, I was able to get, a lineup 206, which is under 211, and 298.35, which is higher than 297, a point higher median projection. Bogdan, Curry, Powell, Jackson, Drummond, Halliburton, Dort, Curry. And this is with the actual ownership. So this is not even with projected ownership. This is the actual ownership. So you can't say that's a little bit off. This is the ownership. Right? You go down here. You still see Jackson, Drummond, Curry, Struss, Nurkic. These lineups are not like, lineups aren't like crazy. Yet these are the lineups that I was building. These are the types of lineups that I was building. If you take a look at my lineup set, right? Look at my exposures. Drummond, Jackson, Harris, Halliburton, Adebayo, Curry, Giddey, VanVleet, Dort, Struss, Duarte, Curry, Hero. By less than the field on Hero. Barnes, and the Kings. Right? I wasn't building nutso lineups. Right? I was building lineups. If we take a look at the projection versus ownership on these, okay, well, these have the original projected ones. Like I'm getting still in that range, in that 200 to 180 to 220 type of range here. So it's like if you just even did this experiment, which I don't have to do. I've done this a million times. I could always look at a guy that has an RGV, a salary adjusted plus minus of that high, and a SPASH rating of that high, and go like this is a near lock. This is a 95% efficiently owned guy. They're not going to be 95% owned. If it'll be less than 95% owned, I'm actually getting positive leverage by playing them. Isaiah Jackson came in at 54. About efficient. I think about efficient. Somewhere in that range, 50 to 60 range. Right? I thought the most over-owned player, like if we sort by ownership here, when we compare it here, like I think McCollum was a little over-owned. Hero was about efficiently owned. Like some guys, like I think Maxey was fine. Steph Curry was fine. Like guys like DeLon Wright was underowned. I think Halliburton was actually underowned at 16 by a little bit. Seth Curry was underowned at 8. Max Struss was underowned at 8. Bogdan was underowned at 6. I think Powell was a little bit underowned. Herter was a little bit underowned. Trey Mann at 3%. Ibaka was underowned. It just didn't fit into a lot of lineups. So guys can be popular. Like Giddey, 41% overowned. Tobias at 38, maybe slightly overowned. Slightly. 35, maybe. Giddey probably should have been like 30 to 32. Still fine. One of the best projected players on the slate. Doesn't mean you don't play him. But this is what I mean by thinking in terms. Number one, we're building lineups, not players. We're not choosing players. We went through that whole thing of like, well, if we take Drummond out, what does our lineup look like? We put Drummond in. Can we get to that? Can we get to that ownership level for your total lineup and have a better projection? And it turns out you could. Plenty. You could play plenty of Drummond lineups that were better than non-Drummond lineups because Drummond projected for so much higher for his salary than anyone else on this slate. So even at 79% ownership, he was under-owned. Don't think in terms of chalk. Like, I got to fade chalk. He said, no, you just got to build lineups that have high projections for lower ownership. That balance. Some contain Drummond. Some may not contain Drummond. Now, most will. Because you're giving up 10 points in projection right off the bat by not playing them in the best possible lineup. You could only get worse than that. Like, let's take a look at Jackson, for instance. Okay, we'll do that same exact thing for Jackson. Okay? So let's go. The lineup, we're using one just so we could build with the ownership that's currently in here. Okay, let's get rid of this. Okay, so we're going to build that one lineup again with Drummond, with everyone in it, right? So we have this, the 308.7 lineup, 269 ownership. So let's take out Jackson. What's the best possible lineup without Jackson? 303.49. Okay, so you're sacrificing about a little over 5 points by not having Jackson. And you're dropping about 35 percentage points in ownership. Sacrificing 5 points for the best possible lineup, anything could be lower than 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's pretty hefty for a single player. 5 points, but it's doable. That's why I said the efficient ownership on Jackson is probably around 50 to 60%. Sacrificing 10 points in projection for a guy that isn't 95+% owned? Why? He's under-owned. If you got rid of Jackson and Drummond, let's say, they're going to be the chalkiest players. I'm going to fade them both. Oh my God, I'm going to do so well when they fail. Even though they succeed. One succeeds 80+% of the time, the other succeeds 60+, 55+% of the time. Okay, I'm going to build one without Drummond and without Jackson. Okay, 293.31. So the best possible projected lineup you can make without Jackson and Drummond, you had to sacrifice 15 points to do so. And you were still playing guys like Harris and Bam and Giddey. You're still playing guys that were still owned, still chalky, right? Sacrificing 15 points in projection. Now let's go back. Okay, let's go back and add both of them back in. Now Giddey was 41% owned, so let's take out Giddey. Okay, top optimal is 308.7. I take out Giddey, 305.67. So by not playing Giddey, I'm now sacrificing 3 points. Well, that seems a lot more doable. Right? Let's say I take out Harris. What do I get? 305.4, sacrificing about 3 points. That's doable. 3-pointer. That's it. That's all you're sacrificing. Those are the types of guys at 35, 40% ownership that are replaceable. You're sacrificing 3 points. But then there are people out there that are like, well, I'm not going to play Drummond. I'm not going to play Jackson. I'm not going to play Harris. I'm not going to play Giddey. And then I'm going to play a lineup. Well, the best possible lineup from that point is going to be you're sacrificing 20 points in projection. Is that necessary? You can make better as I would say better and you can make lineups that are equally as owned as an aggregate in total that have better projections that have those players in it. Maybe not all 4 of those players, but 3 of those players, 2 of those players. But to fade all 4, you're just basically telling the field, I don't mind starting with a 20-point. You guys start with a 20-point head start. And hopefully all of those guys fail. Even though the probability of that happening is low in comparison to their ownership. This is why you don't think in terms of chalk and not chalk. Owned and over-owned. That's how you should be thinking. Well, this guy's going to be 35% owned. I'm going to fade him. Well, should he be 35% owned? Or should he be 50% owned? Or should he be 20% owned? If you have a 35% owned guy that really efficiently should be 20% owned, you should be more likely to you're not going to get a lot of them. is not worth his ownership as much. He could still be in lineups. He still projects well. But you're going to have to make up that negative leverage by playing guys that are under-owned, more guys that are under-owned in your lineup. A player that's 35% owned that should be 50% owned, doesn't matter that he's the chalkiest player on the slate. He should be 50. Take advantage of that. This happens primarily in basketball only because players' distributed outcomes are much more normal. There's no like home run. Like any guy in baseball, any guy could go 0 for 5 on any given day. Mike Trout, 0 for 5. And then the crappiest hitter could hit 2 home runs. Like that distribution is not normal. Same for football there because of touchdowns. Nowhere near as normal as in basketball. And because outcomes for players are more normally distributed, like that why do you think you go into results DB and you see a lot of players that a lot of sharp players, they typically jam the high point per dollar salary adjusted value players and just jam them. Maybe not lock button, but jam, like just as much as whatever it is should be. Yesterday I came in 5th in the 20 max. Had a good day. Made a little over $1,000. If you take a look at my lineup, Keith Heister, eyes, 819, came in 1st. Right, I didn't play Bain. Right, so even had Halliburton and didn't need it. Gary Trent. Right, you take a look at this. Take a look at this lineup. You didn't need much. You have 4% owned Bain, 8% owned Gary Trent, and pretty much like just give me chalk. Right, give me Jackson, Drummond, and whatever fits. Right, take a look at my top lineup. Right, look, Herder at 4%, Struss at 9%. Right, but I had Jackson, Drummond, Maxey, a 44% owned Giddey, FVV, Steph Curry. I mean, this isn't rocket science. Came in 5th place. If we take a look at exposures, this is in the 20 max, I guess, right? So let's look in the $15 one, right? The field on Drummond was 78.6%. Take a look at the exposure percentages of like all these sharp players. 100, 88, 84, 100, 82, 90, 98, 94, 100, 100, 100, 95, 100. This is in 150 lineups. Isaiah Jackson came in at 54%. Here are the exposures. 64, 62, 52, 98, 32, 42, 48, 57, 70, 74, 75, 33, 60, and 50. Most were over. And even if you take a look at Giddey was people around field weight, right? 40. Right, Petty Theft had 90%, but Petty Theft does he plays a very tight core and just kind of, this is what I got, and if it all hits, it'll be everywhere. Very condensed, higher variance play. Toby Harris, most of the sharper players were over on him. Right? Morant, not as much so, other than the Colts. Hero, not as much so. Right? The Colts had a much more condensed pool. Right? CJ McCollum, pretty light. Steph Curry, depending on if you're going up or down for a high price guard. Maxey, seems like more over than anything, or at least substantial enough. Jetty Osman, mixed. I guess it depends on whether or not you switched out when that news happened. Right, but you just look through here. It's like people got different elsewhere in multiple different spots. You could get it, right? Seth Curry down here. A lot of people over on Seth Curry. Right? Get different with all these types of players. But on the top, with the highest projected guys that have high salary adjusted plus minuses, pretty much jamming them. They're under-owned. Told me Drummond was 95% owned. He probably still shows up in God knows how many lineups. But that's the main reason, because a lot of times the chalk to that extent is not owned enough because there are stupid people out there that go, I'm just going to fade the chalk because that's they think too binary, too black and white. Isaiah Jackson, too black and white. On the slate coming up, Dinwiddie we have right now. I mean, as of our morning algorithmic projections. 5,900, Beal is out. Is a salary adjusted plus minus of 5.2. So let's do that experiment with their current numbers. Okay? So we run the optimal, whatever the top median projected lineup, 276.59. Okay? Let's take Dinwiddie out. 271.98. Okay, so we're giving up what? 272 to 277, 4.5 points, which is a decent amount, but it's doable. It's doable. What is his efficient ownership? His efficient ownership on this slate, as of the current numbers, the way they are, remember, 6 hours from now, 7 hours from now, to blow everything up. 800 people are out. People are back and sick, and who knows? But as of right now, his efficient ownership is probably somewhere around 40, 45%. Probably something like that. So if he's going to be 60% owned, now we're starting to talk about an over-owned player. If he ends up being the chalkiest player at 35% owned, maybe even be under-owned. And that's where people like watch my shows, especially like new players. Or they see me on Grinders Live or Crunch Time. Like, do I like a player? Like, I don't know what you mean by like. I'm building 8-player lineups, first off. So I don't care about the players. But it's all in relation to the ownership. Without that number, that does nothing. I don't know what's going to happen. We have these distributions. That's what projections are. 50th percentile outcomes are the medians. But it could be, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen today. I don't know. I just know if you sim this out 10,000 times, here are all the outcomes. And where do they bunch closer together? That's it. But then you compare that to the ownership. So you tell me Dinwiddie, if Dinwiddie's going to be 80% owned, I'd be like, that's a good spot. Maybe you're playing more lineups that don't have it. Because 80% would be over-owned for this slate as it currently stands. But you tell me Dinwiddie's 10% owned, and he may be in every one of my lineups. That decision has nothing to do with, do I think he's going to do well? Or even what his projection is. It's the projection versus the ownership. The more under-owned the player is for their projection, the more likely that I'm going to be playing more of them. The more over-owned the player is based on their projection, the less likely. Less lineups that he'll end up being. Because those lineups will project lower than lineups that are actually lower owned than that lineup. This is DFS. Nate Branshaw, do you feel like in general the field is more likely to respond to news closer to lock? I felt like some of the Atlanta guys came in lower owned than they should have in my contest. Yes. Obviously, it depends on the stakes. Go up in stakes, much more observant players. You still get observant players everywhere, but I mean, the closer to lock the news is, the less that ownership is going to adjust for it. So like yesterday, for instance, like the Embiid news, like Drummond, Harris, Maxey, Curry, that was all built in. That was all baked in. You ain't getting an ownership discount because the news came in, 8 hours before the slate? Everyone knew about that. And everyone built lineups based on it. Everyone. 99% of people. The Sabonis news. That came out a couple hours later, right? Right, but then we still had Goga. Is he going to play? Is Brissett going to play? And we got that around, I don't know, 5 o'clock or so? Something like that. That Goga wasn't going to play, and then Brissett doesn't look like. Brissett was technically questionable, or a game time decision, but the coach said, doesn't look optimistic. That was like 2 hours before the slate, an hour and a half before the slate. People, it was mostly adjusted for that. Ownership efficiently adjusted for that to some extent, to the most extent. The Butler news, that was kind of priced into ownership. But as you get closer to lock, that Trae Young was the last one. Garland and Young, those are the last ones. So now it's not like the Cavs guys projected all that greatly. They got bumps, right? But it wasn't like, oh my God, I got to smash Jetty Osman. You didn't have to. It was okay. He went from being nothing to being okay. But most likely, those types of things, they're going to get an ownership bump, but probably not to an efficient level. So like DeLon Wright and Bogdan and Herter, if we knew that information 8 hours before then, probably would have been more efficiently owned. And none of those three guys were like smash button plays, right? They projected well. They were okay. They were good. They were good. They went from kind of off the radar to, oh, these are good plays, especially at weaker shooting guard and small forward positions, right? Scarcer position. But yeah, closer to lock, I'm more by default. The closer the news is to lock, the more likely I'm going to have more of them. Doesn't mean I'm saying, oh my God, Trae Young is out. Give me 100% DeLon Wright. I'm not saying that. But I would lean more towards jamming late news, and especially after lock, right? Because late swap is even less than stuff that's like 10 minutes before lock. But I'll default. I'd rather lean towards being a little bit more aggressive towards late news that is closer to lock than news that was 8 hours ago or 4 hours. As it gets closer, more that ownership will adjust for it to a more efficient level. Doesn't mean it will be efficient, but at least to a more efficient level. You weren't going to go into last night's slate and have Drummond at 22% owned. Oh, no one adjusted for not enough people adjusted for the Embiid news. But I can tell you, Drummond would have been 22% owned if we got that Embiid news at 653. Right? You would have go 653, Embiid's out. Got 7 minutes before the game locks. Right? Like Drummond at that point should be 95% owned. And he may come in at like 25 or 30. I mean, maybe he comes in at 50 even, but even though, like in that scenario, now that's a lot. Try to get him as much. Now you're getting as much as you can. You know he's going to be massively underowned for his projection. Harris too. Like Harris would have been 14% owned. Maxey would have been 6% owned if the news was 7 minutes before lock, but we got the news 7 hours before lock. But yes, I'm with you. I do that in football also. In a surprise inactive at 11:30, 90 minutes before game, the 1 p.m. lock. Something, we had that, 2 years ago with Zeke. And I just jammed the hell out of Pollard at like near minimum price. He came in at like 12% owned. When if we knew that news on Wednesday, he would have been like 56% owned or something. I'm more likely to be aggressive in those spots. Yes. Masher, is one of these better? Okay. The answer is there's really no such thing. Getting ownership product down with a 1% owned player and some chalk versus a collection of 5 to 10% owned players and less chalk. Obviously, it depends on the projection and ownership, right, of the specific slate and where obviously positional scarcity. I mean, there are other factors into that. But I've answered this before. Technically, the lineups probably have similar expected values. But the one that's I'd rather have a 4v4 than a 1v1. So I'm not big on playing lineups where I'm playing like 7 chalk players and then like 1% owned guy. I'm more likely to have it more spread out. Because the problem comes in is that the 7 players that are chalky that combination of players is going to be in a bunch of lineups as it is. Like the only differentiating factor is that 1% owned player. So the only way that I can win is if the 1% owned guy goes off. If I have a 4v4 of 5 to 10% owned players, those players typically, obviously, if they're more owned, project better. So your projection goes up. Your ownership still ends up being about the same, but it gives me more, I get more outs. Right? As long as 2 pieces of the chalk fail and 2 of my pieces do well, I can win. In the 1% example, you pretty much need like all the chalk to do well and your 1% owned guy to do well. And it's going to be a high scoring slate. So whenever you're playing lineups that are like 7 chalky players and a 1% owned guy, you're rooting for a high scoring slate. You're rooting for a high scoring slate and having the differentiator. I'd rather root for low scoring slates. I want chalk to fail. I don't necessarily want all the chalk to fail, but I want some of the chalk to fail to start knocking out lineups. And hopefully I have the combination. You know, if there's 4 chalk players, chalk, right? Remember what I said before, saying terms like chalk and not chalk, it's really over-owned and under-owned. But if let's say there's 4 highly owned players, it's like, and you're playing a lot of lineups that have 2 of the 4. Which 2? Who knows? Whichever ones, right? You're making 100 lineups and it's all combinations of 2 of them. You want 2 of them to fail because 2 of them fail, half the lineups get knocked out of the contest. And 2 of them succeed, and then you have the right combination of everyone else. Is it better? No, if we read this out 1,000,000 times, you'd end up with the same amount of money at the end. The problem is that the variance on your 7 chalky 1% owned guy is going to be ridiculous. You're basically going to like lose most of the time and win once. At least with the 4v4, you're going to come in, the distribution of your outcomes is going to be more spread out. So really your sacrifice, like, oh, do I want to play this type of lineup 5,000 times and lose $49.99 and win $100,000 once? Hopefully if the bankroll should survive that. Or do you want to play more lesser owned combinations of players that could be spread along that payout curve? So at the end, yes, you end up with the same amount of money after 700 lifetimes. It's the journey, how to get there. You play with the 1% owned guy and all the chalk, you may be dead. You may be dead several times. You may go broke 170 times and be dead 100 times before you actually get to the profitability point. Devin's in the chat. Oh, Devin's here. Even though Steve's doing the producing, but Devin's here anyway. Okay. Long-time listener, first-time caller. When doing single entry, do you allow smaller discrepancies of efficient ownership to dictate your construction decisions? Not really. I think in smaller field single entry stuff, I don't even think you have to get that granular. Or do you try to focus on the players where you see the biggest discrepancy? Yes. Now you put in my answer. Like, let's just say you estimate that a guy's going to be 22% owned, and you think that he should be only 18% owned. That's close enough. What are you wasting your time on? It's close enough. You're looking for the big discrepancies. Yesterday, Drummond was probably the biggest discrepancy. Weird to say that the chalkiest player on the slate was the biggest discrepancy. But if yesterday you played Drummond Jackson, focused on that, and okay, is Hero going to be over-owned? Is Bam going to be over-owned? Is Harris going to be over-owned? And then you end up playing like Maxey, Drummond, Jackson. You fade Giddey. You find some other cheap, like small forward. Maybe you play Osman. You play Osman or Struss or one of the Hawks guys, right? Bogdan, Herder, one of those guys. Or Duarte. I thought he was fine. And then just jamming just the optimal from there. Then you're fine. You're fine at that point. Right. You focus. You should be especially when you're playing smaller field single entry, you're probably playing lineups that are much closer to the optimal anyway. You're not sacrificing 20 points in 1,000 entry single entry contest. Like you're likely not doing that. You're most likely playing a lineup that's like, I don't know, within 10 points of the optimal, if not 5 to 7. So most likely you're playing a bunch of chalk anyway, because the chalk's the chalk for a reason, right? Because they project the best. So how do you get the differentiator? By focusing on the biggest discrepancies. By going, okay, if I'm going to sacrifice 5 points in my lineup, what's the best way to do it? It's probably by fading the guys that are overowned. And playing the high projected players that are still underowned. So yesterday was Jackson and Drummond. But if you didn't play, like if you had said, okay, I'm not going to play Giddey at 40% or Harris at 38%, say XX, and then thinking that they're overowned, and then you just run the lineup, just basically run it. I mean, dude, you could literally do that. Right? If that's what you determined. If you looked over here and you go, I think right, because the best possible lineup right now, right, is a 305.4. Okay, I'm leaving someone out. Okay, Harris. Okay, so the optimal was about 308.7 based on our projections. So even if you just said, if you looked at this and you go, I think Giddey and Harris are overowned. Let's just say you thought that. Right? And then you run the lineup from there, 303.96. So you're giving up about 4.5 points in projection. 4.5 points. Just play that lineup. There you go. You're done. For a smaller field single entry, there, you're good. Maybe on top of it, okay, what happens if I don't play Bam either? Down to 299.58. So maybe you don't do that. Maybe you don't mind Harris. Right? So it's two. Maybe you fade Giddey, but you still play Harris. Now you're up to 303.38. You still get a very similar lineup, right? Bogdan, Halliburton, Struss, Jackson, Drummond, Curry, Harris, Dort. Done. You're done. Right? Because you're focusing on the biggest discrepancies. You're saying I think Giddey, Harris, Bam are overowned by the biggest amount. So I'll try what type of lineup doesn't have them, and how many points am I giving up by not playing them? Because if you just fade Drummond, you'd give up even more points. So yeah, so focusing on the biggest discrepancies. Do I care the difference between a guy is 8% owned and he should be 6% owned? Especially when you're playing single entry small field. Those type of distinctions may matter a little bit more in the larger field stuff. But even then, at the point, the example that I gave with the 8 and 6, that may not even matter that much. Because remember, in larger fields, you're most likely playing lineups that are much further off the optimal and much lower owned. So obviously the difference between a 12% owned guy that should be 6 and a 6% owned guy that should be 12 could make a difference in a lot of your lineups. That's 6% difference. As opposed to a guy that's 32% owned that really should be 34% owned. Like, it's not going to make that much of a difference. You shouldn't be spending that much time concerning yourself with that. If he shows up in your lineup, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't. It's close enough to efficient that, and also the margin of error. Remember, you're not going to know what the actual is. We project a guy for 32% owned. You go, oh, he's going to be over-owned at 32, and he comes in at 18. And you're like, well, if he was 18, I should have played more of him, right? I mean, that's kind of the skill of DFS. Is projecting what the field's going to do. CG, do I use any randomness when I build my lineups? No. Only because I'm deciding what I'm doing. I use the tool as an efficiency tool. I will build the lineups that I want. I'm not letting the tool, it could throw in any. No. So I want the actual projection as it is, with my ownership in as it is, and I will build my 50 lineups yesterday. Masher, for a sport with a lot of correlation, MLB and NHL, do you think about over-owned, under-owned stacks instead of players? Correct. Technically, you're thinking about under-owned and over-owned lineups, if you want to think about it technically. But yes, you should not be thinking in terms of players. You should be thinking in terms of total lineups versus the field size, versus the ownership versus the field size, versus the payout structure. You shouldn't be selecting play. I'm going to play this guy and that guy and this guy and this guy and that guy. And I have 4,200 left. So whoever's left. Like, that shouldn't be the way that you play DFS. The good thing about a tool like Lineup HQ is that you can run lineups and take a look at them individually. Just line up. You're just looking at lineups. So I don't have to think in terms of what players am I playing. It's just like what players make up a lineup that projects for this and is owned at that. That's it. I don't know what's in there. I don't know. Okie doke. Yeah. So tonight's slate, it's not like we have to go over anything. 8,000 things are going to happen probably, right? Is Jokic going to play? Who knows, right? Right, we have Butler questionable. Yeah, what's the point? What is the point? There is no point. But there is a point in hitting that thumbs up button on your way out the door. Helps us out. It helps us out. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Grinders Live, they'll go over. Grinders Live will go over the slate tonight. 5 o'clock, 5:10 p.m. Eastern on this YouTube channel. So hit that notification bell. They'll go over. Those guys will go over the slate when we have actually more news and stuff. We'll know more. Then at 6:20 p.m. for premium members only, it's crunch time. Andy Means, Kevin Roth, whoever's on with them. They'll react to the late breaking news and everything, go over Draftkings Fanduel, everything right before lock. So sign up for RotoGrinders, rotogrinders.com/premium. And if you want to post questions, if you're listening to the podcast feed and you never hear live, join premium. I got a Discord channel in our premium Discord, Blender's Game Theory. So just post your questions there. I answer everything. We also do group coaching calls about once a week. The next one is Saturday at 2 p.m. for noon. I move them around. So it hits people that they can't make it on nights. They can only make it weekends. So it moves around a bunch. And it's a Zoom call. And you just get on and share your screen, talk whatever you want. It's like private coaching in a group setting. So join RotoGrinders Premium. And as always, all the concepts that I talk about are in my course that doesn't come up. That I guess I need to check on the domain. I don't know what happened there. I guess it's down for now. theoryofdfs.com. Go there. Don't go there right now. Apparently it's down. I'll go check out what's wrong with that. And I'll meet up with you tomorrow. Another day's tomorrow, where I answer your DFS strategy questions, as always, on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.